Imagine this: a sitting US president caught red-handed sending spies into the territory of a NATO ally, plotting a takeover of Greenland as if the 21st century were a rerun of 19th century colonial land grabs. That's not a political thriller. That's Donald Trump's latest humiliation on the global stage. For years, Trump has blurred the line between personal ambition and America's foreign policy. But this moment, being accused of espionage against Denmark, a founding NATO member, is beyond scandal. It's a direct assault on the trust that binds the world's most powerful military alliance. This video will argue one central thesis: Donald Trump's reckless Greenland operations didn't just backfire, they exposed him as a global liability, leading NATO allies to publicly humiliate him and question America's credibility under his leadership. We will trace the political context that led to this extraordinary fallout, analyze the motivations behind Trump's Greenland obsession, and examine the brutal responses from Denmark and other NATO leaders. Then, we'll connect these diplomatic embarrassments to Trump's broader pattern: cozying up to Vladimir Putin while alienating democracies, undermining America's economy, and fueling distrust at home and abroad. Finally, we'll look at what this humiliation means for the future of NATO, US foreign policy, and Trump's political survival. This isn't just about Greenland. It's about the erosion of alliances, the weaponization of foreign policy for personal gain, and the growing fear that Trump's America cannot be trusted. To understand why NATO allies moved so quickly to humiliate Trump after his Greenland stunt, we need to step back and examine the political and historical context. Greenland, an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, has been strategically vital for decades. It houses US military bases, including Thule Air Base, a critical early warning site for missile defense. For Denmark, Greenland is not just a piece of land. It's part of its national identity, connected for more than 800 years. For NATO, it's a front line in the Arctic, where Russian and Chinese ambitions are growing. Against this backdrop, Trump's attempt to treat Greenland like a piece of real estate up for grabs wasn't just offensive, it was a geopolitical provocation. Key players quickly emerged. Denmark's government summoned US diplomats, signaling that espionage by an ally is intolerable. Danish officials, usually diplomatic to a fault, delivered blunt rebukes. One parliamentarian told Trump directly, "Greenland is not for sale. Mr. Trump, back off." NATO leaders privately fumed, because if Article 5 of the treaty, the core commitment that an attack on one is an attack on all, is undermined by the US itself, then the entire alliance becomes meaningless. The stakes couldn't be higher. Trump wasn't just humiliating himself. He was undermining the very fabric of NATO at a time when Russia's war in Ukraine and China's polar ambitions demand unity. While European leaders were bracing for security challenges, Trump was publicly bashing late-night comedians and cuddling up to Putin. The contrast made America look unhinged and deeply unreliable. This is why the Greenland debacle became a tipping point. It crystallized the fear that under Trump, the United States is not the anchor of NATO, but its weakest link. Trump's decision to send spies into Greenland wasn't just reckless, it was a catastrophic miscalculation that shattered NATO's trust in the US. According to reports, Trump's regime deployed covert operatives in Greenland to map out a potential takeover plan, effectively treating an allied territory as hostile ground. Denmark swiftly summoned the top US envoy, a rare diplomatic slap in the face. One Danish parliamentarian delivered perhaps the most humiliating rebuke, declaring, "Greenland has been part of the Danish kingdom for 800 years. It is not for sale. Mr. Trump, back off." By treating Greenland like a prize to be seized, Trump revealed his transactional worldview. Allies exist only to be exploited. But this behavior cut deeper than his usual insults. Espionage is what adversaries do, not allies. The fact that Denmark, a founding NATO member, had to publicly call out Washington, exposed a breakdown in alliance trust, and worse, it signaled to Russia and China that NATO unity could be fractured from within. The Greenland debacle revealed Trump's authoritarian instinct: redraw borders by force, not negotiation. This undermined Article 5 of NATO, the sacred clause binding the alliance. When a U.S. president is seen as a threat to allies rather than their protector, the credibility of the entire alliance collapses. Even as Trump undermined Denmark, he was expanding ties with Vladimir Putin and Russia, deepening fears that his loyalties lay with strongmen rather than democratic allies. Reports showed Trump was considering opening more diamond trade with Russia, while Exxon pursued deals in Moscow's energy sector under his blessing. At the same time, Trump lashed out at allies like Denmark and ignored calls from India's Prime Minister Modi. This double standard was glaring. NATO allies watched Trump attack democracies while rewarding authoritarian regimes. Instead of leading the West, Trump positioned the U.S. as a partner in Putin's global energy and diamond trade ambitions. This pattern echoes his Helsinki summit in 2018, where he sided with Putin over U.S. intelligence agencies. For NATO, it sent a chilling message. America under Trump might not honor its commitments if Putin were the aggressor. The Greenland espionage scandal thus intersected with a broader narrative. Trump actively weakened Western solidarity while courting leaders who benefit from chaos. NATO humiliation was not just Denmark's anger. It was every ally's fear that the U.S. commander-in-chief had switched sides in the global contest between democracy and autocracy. Trump's global humiliation was amplified by his inability to manage America's economy and domestic crises. Allies saw not just espionage abroad, but dysfunction at home. By mid-2025, more than 806,000 layoffs had been recorded in the U.S. Nearly 48% of consumer credit applications were denied, while 41.8% of refinancing applications, the highest in 12 years, were rejected. Over 6 million Americans were in default on student loans. Meanwhile, Treasury yields surged in what economists dubbed the Trump spread, signaling market instability. NATO allies understand that economic power is the bedrock of military strength. A collapsing U.S. economy translates into a weakened NATO. Trump's insistence on politicizing the Federal Reserve, firing board members, and seeking control over monetary policy only amplified fears that America was heading toward a populist-driven financial crisis like Turkey or Argentina. When Trump tried to seize Greenland, European leaders were already questioning Washington's ability to lead. His economic mismanagement only reinforced their humiliation. Why should NATO trust a leader whose reckless policies undermine both domestic stability and international alliances? What made this episode historic wasn't just Trump's espionage. It was NATO allies openly humiliating him in ways rarely seen in transatlantic diplomacy. Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Rasmussen bluntly told the U.S. in March 2025, "We do not appreciate the tone. This is not how you speak to your allies." Another Danish lawmaker was even more direct. "Mr. Trump, off." Such language, unthinkable toward a U.S. president just a decade earlier, was broadcast worldwide. These statements signaled a shift. Allies no longer feared Trump's wrath. They openly defied him. By humiliating Trump in public, Denmark effectively invited other NATO members to question his legitimacy. The Greenland debacle turned into a case study of how far America had fallen, from indispensable leader to unpredictable rogue actor. For NATO, this was survival instinct. If Trump could normalize espionage against allies, then the alliance itself had no foundation. Denmark's humiliation of Trump wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. They needed to show Moscow, Beijing, and the world that NATO unity exists independently of Trump's behavior. Taken together, Trump's Greenland operations, His coziness with Putin, America's economic chaos, and NATO's public humiliation highlight a bigger truth. Trump is not just a domestic political crisis, he's an international liability. The Greenland debacle was not an isolated scandal. It was a mirror reflecting the larger breakdown of trust between the United States and its allies under Trump. When NATO leaders openly humiliate a US president, the consequences ripple far beyond Copenhagen. It signals to adversaries like Russia and China that America's alliances are vulnerable and that divisions can be exploited. The bigger picture here is one of erosion. NATO depends on credibility. If member states begin to doubt Washington's commitments, the deterrent effect of the alliance weakens. That's why Denmark's unusually blunt rebuke struck such a chord. It was not just about Greenland, but about the US abandoning the very norms of alliance behavior. Looking ahead, there are two possible scenarios. In one, Trump continues his course, doubling down on authoritarian instincts, trying to seize control of the Federal Reserve, alienating NATO, and cozying up to Putin. That scenario risks unraveling decades of transatlantic cooperation and emboldening autocrats worldwide. In another scenario, NATO recalibrates, developing mechanisms to shield itself from the volatility of US politics. That might mean greater European defense spending, new bilateral agreements, or even discussions about a NATO minus Trump contingency. Either way, the Greenland humiliation has accelerated conversations about how much longer allies can depend on Washington if Trump remains a dominant force. In short, this wasn't just a diplomatic embarrassment. It was a wake-up call about America's future role in the world and whether its leadership can still be trusted. Donald Trump's Greenland operations were not a sideshow. They were a symptom of something far deeper. A presidency willing to treat allies as adversaries, to undermine NATO's unity, and to gamble America's credibility for personal ambition. Denmark's humiliation of Trump was more than diplomatic theater. It was a declaration that the world will not quietly tolerate a US president acting like a rogue actor within his own alliance. We've seen how espionage against Denmark, coziness with Putin, and reckless economic policies converge into a single narrative. Trump weakens America at home and humiliates it abroad. NATO's public rebukes underscore the loss of trust, while rising domestic instability fuels doubts about US leadership. Together, these events form a chilling reality, the collapse of American reliability under Trump's watch. So here's the question. If NATO allies openly humiliate a sitting US president, what does that say about America's standing in the world? And more importantly, can the United States ever regain that trust? If you found this deep dive valuable, don't forget to hit the like button. Share this video with others who care about the future of democracy, and subscribe for more sharp, fact-driven political analysis. Your voice matters. Join the conversation in the comments below.